Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is April Smith. I'm the Education Manager at NAFA. Thank you for joining us for the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series. Before we do get started, just a few housekeeping notes. First, this session is being recorded and a copy of that recording will be made available to you in the coming days. All attendees are currently muted to minimize background noise. However, we encourage your participation throughout the session. Please share your questions or comments using the chat feature in your Zoom toolbar. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, don't hesitate to reach out to the NAFA team through the chat. And now, to officially get things underway, it's my pleasure to turn things over to John Bonnets.
Thank you so much, April. We so appreciate the collaboration with NAFA. Welcome, everybody, to the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar for today, the Electric Vehicle Options for Law Enforcement. I'm really pleased that we have such a fine collection of speakers for you today. And I'm especially pleased because I'm a little bit under the weather, got a head cold. I have tremendous support from Rachel Ellenberger. She'll be your moderator today, and I'm going to really lean on her today. But first, let me kick off the webinar with a little bit about our organization. If you're a new person here, the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center is an outward-facing public service agency of NC State University. And we've been in business for about 32 years now, and 15 of that we've had a transportation program. The Clean Transportation team is 4 people, and we do a wide variety of different educational outreach, technical assistance, training opportunities, and an annual conference, the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference. And so we also do these webinars. And if you'd like to learn more and register for future webinars, you can register either at NAFA or learn more about those through our website, as you can see on this slide. So I think I've already covered this. And moving on, as I mentioned, we've got a wonderful slate of speakers here today to discuss zero emissions options, vehicle options for law enforcement. I hope that what we're going to be hearing about today is candid, unvarnished, firsthand lessons learned from a variety of different perspectives about the pros and cons of vehicle electrification as is suitable for the various duty cycles in law enforcement. In particular, I think, like I said, I will lean on our moderator, Rachel Ellenberger, to introduce the speakers. But first, a few words about her because we're very pleased to have her support here today. Rachel is an environment and sustainability professional and owner and principal consultant of Green Seed Collective. She's providing project management and strategic growth support to mission-driven organizations. She works with nonprofits nationwide, primarily in the Midwest, to design and fund programs and to clarify strategic priorities with a focus on sustainable transportation and renewable energy. Rachel previously spent 3.5 years with Clean Fuels Ohio in progressive leadership roles spanning business management, business development, communications, and fundraising. She's also worked as a consultant with NACFE, the North American Council on Freight Efficiency, and she also brings policy experience from across state, federal, and private sectors, and is living in Columbus, Ohio, where she's joining us today. Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, John. And it's great to be here. Good afternoon. Well, good afternoon for me. Good morning for some. Thanks everybody for joining us today. I would like to thank NAFA and the North Carolina Clean Energy Technology Center out of NC State for inviting me to act as moderator for our webinar today. As John mentioned, we have a great panel of speakers lined up to talk to you today about zero emission vehicle options for law enforcement fleets. And I have the honor of introducing our speakers. So first, I'd like to welcome Lieutenant Brad Hopkins out of the California Highway Patrol. Lieutenant Hopkins has been with the California Highway Patrol for 17 years and worked in 3 different field commands throughout the state. He has served as lieutenant at the Fleet Operations Section for over a year, where he manages the prototyping and assembly of CHP's vehicles. Key to our webinar today, he is also in charge of CHP's Police Vehicle Evaluation Program, in which he tests pursuit-rated vehicles. And prior to joining the CHP, he worked in various automotive technician positions since when he was in high school and obtained a degree in automotive, diesel, and industrial technology from Universal Technical Institute. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Lieutenant Hopkins. And next, I would like to introduce Lieutenant Rusty Rhee with the Chula Vista Police Department in San Diego, California, where he served for 27 years. Over the course of his career, he has worked as a motor officer and agent, street team officer and sergeant, supervisor in the professional standards unit, and in patrol as an officer, agent, sergeant, and lieutenant. In March 2020, he returned to the traffic division, where he continues to serve today. So in addition to overseeing the traffic division, Lieutenant Rhee currently manages special events coordination, the department's senior volunteer program, EVOC operations, and fleet services, along with the many other duties as assigned that accompany police leadership roles. He has also served as the department's range master and a motor instructor, and played a key role in modernizing departmental operations through implementation of a contemporary scheduling and timekeeping system. Born and raised in Southern California, Rusty is an avid motorcyclist and proud father of 2. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Lieutenant Rhee. And finally, I'm happy to introduce Neil Cervenka. Neil is a retired police chief and public safety consultant who brings 25 years of law enforcement experience to us today. Neil advanced from police officer to acting captain in California's Central Valley before serving as chief of police for a small rural agency on California's North Coast. As chief, he launched a social services unit to reduce police interactions with unhoused residents, implemented one of the region's early EV patrol fleets, built an organizational wellness program, and led a citywide emergency management and department-wide cultural modernization effort. Neil is a graduate of the California Peace Officer Standards and Training, otherwise known as POST, Sherman Block Supervisory Leadership Institute, and Post Command College, and he holds a Post-Executive Development Certificate, which is California's highest law enforcement certification. He earned an MBA from California State University, Stanislaus, and served as president of the California Peace Officers Association from 2024 to 2025. Neil, thank you so much for being with us and joining us here today. And so as you can see, we've got a wealth of knowledge and expertise that's ready to be shared with us. Feel free to send your questions in, as April said. Feel free to use the chat during the presentations. We'll be sure to address those during the Q&A section at the end. But first, we're going to hear from Lieutenant Hopkins, who's going to share a little bit about the testing process for zero-emission vehicles with us. And Brad, I'd like to hand this over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me today. As she mentioned, I want to speak about our police vehicle evaluation program that we do, and I'm going to talk about it as a whole because it involves both testing of combustion engine vehicles as well as EVs and hybrids as well. So with this program, we will test all pursuit-rated vehicles for all manufacturers who make them, who want to bring them out for the testing. And we're working on planning our 3rd year of it this year. We do this event next door to our fleet operations at our academy, where we have our emergency vehicle operations course out there. We have a high-speed track that is more road race style, the way it's laid out. So it's not just an oval track, so it can put the vehicles through their tests, as well as what we call our network, where it simulates city streets, where it has intersections and things like that, where we can go out and do our pursuit course. And it's the same facilities we use to train all of our cadets who become officers, but we just run the vehicles through a different type of test for the purpose of testing these pursuit-rated vehicles for the manufacturers. So last year, we tested 14 vehicles for Dodge, GM, as well as Chevy, and Lucid came out as well. So they're an EV-only company. In the previous year, they brought out their Lucid Air. And then this last year, they brought out the Lucid Gravity, which is their new crossover. So I'm going to talk about it as a whole, but I'll talk about some of the specs and stats that we actually got from these EVs that we learned from doing these testing. And so part of this testing, the things that we test is top speed, the anti-lock braking system test, vehicle dynamics, our pursuit course, as well as a high altitude test. Now, for the high altitude, that is the only one that we just test the combustion engine vehicles, simply because the high elevation, we go up to Truckee where it's 5,800 feet, and we're just testing 0 to 60. These EVs are not affected by that altitude because it doesn't need the air for the combustion engine to affect it. So that's the only difference in how we test the EVs from the internal combustion engine vehicles. With that, to give you an idea of some of the stats that we get out of it, when we do the top speed test, it's a standing 2-mile run, so it's from a stop. And to give you an idea, with the Blazer EVs, they did a top speed of 131 miles an hour with a 5.6 second 0 to 60. The Ford Mach-E did it in 124 miles an hour, a 4.5 0 to 60. And the Lucid Gravity, it actually had a top speed of 159 miles an hour. That was the fastest top speed out of all of the vehicles that we tested. And it did a 0 to 60 in 5.6. So that shows you the capabilities of these pursuit rated vehicles to that are EVs to accelerate and hit their top speeds. And a lot of that's really on par with a lot of the different internal combustion engine vehicles that we've tested. So then we go after that and we do our anti-lock brake system test. And what we do is we go from 90 miles an hour to 0 and see how short and how much time it takes to stop those vehicles. And again, the EVs were very similar to a lot of the internal combustion engines, even though traditionally a lot of times the EVs are a heavier vehicle. So sometimes you think they'd be facing those challenges. And just to give you an idea, that the Blazer stopped in 279 feet, the Mach-E did it in 258 feet, and the Lucid Gravity did it in 269 feet. So after that, we run everything through our vehicle dynamics test. And what this is, it's on our test track, that road course style track. It's 2 miles long. And we run these vehicles 32 laps on there. And so it's not just to test its ability to go through the course for its handling, its acceleration, its braking. It's an endurance test. And some of the things we've learned from that and the difference we've seen between the gas-powered vehicles and the EVs is we require the gas-powered vehicles to make it all 32 laps. So what it is, it's 4 8-lap segments that we do. So we stop in between, and they have to go on full tank of gas and they can't fuel up. The EVs, because they're being driven so hard and the speeds they're being driven at, they consume a lot more of their battery doing this test. So after the second run, which is 16 laps, they're allowed to fully charge the vehicles back up to 100%. And with that, part of the reason too is, unlike a gas-powered engine that will have the same power all the way until it runs out of gas, electric vehicles, as they get lower on battery, you start to see a decrease in overall performance because of that. So then we moved on and we did what we call our pursuit course. So with that, it's kind of interesting. The whole purpose we do our pursuit course, it's not to time it. It's not anything like that. It's really just a pass-fail. And the reason why we created this, it was simulated out of a pursuit that actually happened out of our CHP North Sacramento area office back in 1994. And the route that this pursuit ran caused excessive overheating of the brakes. So at the end of a pursuit, we don't have time to drive slow and cool down. It's you come to a dead stop, you put that vehicle in park, and you're handling business. Well, the brakes caught on fire on this car. So it brought something to our attention and a lesson to learn of watching what these vehicles do and how the brakes are, to where we know if it can make it through that really hard driving scenario. So we simulated on our network the same kind of course and route that ran for that pursuit. And we run all these vehicles through it. So the whole idea of it is, when it comes to the end of that pursuit, we just come to a stop, put the vehicle in park, and see whether or not these brakes will flare up and catch on fire. And there's been vehicles in the past that have failed, but just to give an example, this last year, out of the 14 vehicles, the only one that actually didn't make it to that point of the testing was not an EV. So all 3 of the EVs made it through this course. And as I mentioned, a lot of these EVs are heavier, and we were driven very hard on the brakes, and it made it through the course. So it's really good to see that and see how these vehicles have evolved and being able to be used in these pursuit capacities. And a little bit of info too that we use with this testing. We use these race logic devices in these vehicles and helps gather a lot of these data as we're doing the lap times and getting everything kind of gathered up to make it very accurate and fair for the testing. Another thing we do as well, it's a little unique, is we add 60 pounds to the front of these vehicles and 400 pounds over as close to the rear axle as we can for this testing. And that helps for the simulating of push bumpers on the front if they don't have them, and all of the equipment and gear police vehicles have thrown in them. And that's where it's important for vehicles to have adequate payload capacity as well. And then another good thing about this event that we do, we invite out people from other law enforcement agencies as well as police vendors and upfitters. And it's great for them to come out and be able to see this event, see what these vehicles are doing in person. And there's also a ride and drive option with the manufacturers where they set up some of these vehicles to be driven on our road course, to where people can come out from agencies, test vehicles and see what it's all about before they decide to buy their fleet. It could have an influence on what they want to buy or if they're interested in the EV market. And some info, if anyone is interested in looking into what our actual evaluation was about and what the results were from last year, on our public website, chp.ca.gov, about 3/4 of the way down the page is our link for police vehicle evaluation program. And it gives you all these results and all these stats. It's something to look into, and it's very interesting to see how these EVs have compared to internal combustion engines. And if anyone knows of anyone in law enforcement who's interested in coming out to see this event, they just need to RSVP with us. But it's out here in West Sacramento on October 10th and 11th this year. And, like I said, all agencies are welcome. This is a free event that we put on to show everyone what this is all about and help them decide on what police vehicles they want. And again, any manufacturers that continue to get involved in the EVs, we bring all their pursuit rated vehicles out and run them through these tests. We're open to do that. And that's my presentation for you guys. And thank you. And I'll give it back to you, Rachel.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brad. We already have a question, which is great. So we'll save that for the Q&A. Next, we're going to hear from Lieutenant Rhee, who's going to share a little bit about his experience around the purchasing and upfitting process for these zero emission vehicles. Rusty, I will pass this over to you.
All right, thank you, Rachel. And I do, just to kick it off, I have attended the event that Brad speaks of, the Ride and Drive. It is a fantastic event. It's a great opportunity. So if you do have the opportunity, I highly recommend it. I'm Lieutenant Rusty Rhee from the Chula Vista Police Department. Been doing this job for a long time, as you heard in my bio. But I work for an agency that you may have heard of. We're known for our drones. We're known for being technology forward. But we aren't always the first to come to things. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those difficulties and some of those challenges. But to start that off, I'm going to give you a little background on my department. The city of Chula Vista is 54 square miles. We are, John, are you running the slideshow? Maybe it's not on his, sorry. We have a population of about 300,000 people, which consists of, and then our department itself is just under 300 sworn, although we're currently running about 30 short. And then we have 114 civilian positions. That gives our fleet about 200 vehicles all combined. And about 100 of those vehicles are our patrol cars, though they're not all assigned to patrol. Obviously, we have our SROs, we have traffic cars, we have our homeless outreach team. We have other uses for black and whites outside of patrol, but about 100 of them would be a patrol configured vehicle. And that kind of makes up our fleet. When I took over fleet back in 2000 or 2020, we had recently acquired solar panels and a bunch of EV chargers as part of a deal with our local electrical provider. That happened in 2017. Next slide, please. With those, we had 35 level 2 chargers that were available for fleet, 17 level 2 chargers which are available for personal vehicles and people to drive people who have their own EVs that do drive to and from work. And then we'd outfitted our fleet with 16 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that were used solely for detectives and our community service officer positions. Those are our non-sworn. They're available to take lesser reports, write parking tickets, help with traffic direction, things of those natures. But we were not using any EVs or plug-in hybrids for patrol operations. We also had 6 full EVs that were part of our EV program. And beginning in 2020, most of our patrol vehicles were hybrids that we purchased. So everything purchased from 2020 on, for the most part, was going to be a hybrid, unless it was a special application. As you've probably experienced, as a lot of the cities are really pro electrification. There's a lot of benefits to it, and the general public and our city council, our mayor, all advocating for these things and wanting to push us this direction. If you're not law enforcement or you haven't worked with cops, one of the things about us that we commonly joke about is the only thing we like worse than exactly how things are is any change. So changing to EVs with the officers themselves and with the command structure of the police department was definitely a challenging scenario and not something people were for. The thought process in everybody's heads are nightmares of being in a pursuit and the car failing or dying, and then they can't continue the pursuit, or they're stuck somewhere miles from town needing to get towed back, or a detective who's out on an investigation and can't continue, has to stop somewhere and stop their investigation to charge the vehicle for however long it takes to get back to be able to move. So those were kind of the scenarios in people's heads when they talked about EVs for patrol cars and EVs for the police department. Next slide, please. So one of the things that came to us was I made a proposal to expand our fleet. And in doing so, the way we did that was, for those of you who don't know, we hot seat our cars. A lot of agencies do that. And basically it means that, one officer gets off shift, jumps out of the car, and the next officer coming on shift jumps into the exact same car. And that car is run for 2 out of 3 shifts, sometimes 3 out of 3 shifts every day in and day out until it's burned out, which means the cars don't last real long. It also means the officers don't take care of them. They don't care about them. They don't take personal ownership. They often look at the oil change light as something that the next guy will write it up for. And we were experiencing vehicle failures where, cars were running out of oil. The oil wasn't getting changed in a timely manner. Lots of mechanical problems that really just came down to a lack of accountability for the individual officers driving the car. So I pushed forward a proposal to create a shared vehicle program, which was to basically allow a single car to be shared between an officer on the weekends and an officer who worked during the week. And now they're responsible to each other to take care of the car. If something doesn't get done during the week, you know exactly who didn't do it. If something doesn't get taken care of on the weekend, you know exactly who didn't do it. And if you can't find a partner because you don't take care of your car, you don't keep it clean, you end up back in the pool cars, which are nasty and disgusting. But one of the key sales points for this is I've got to get the city and the city council to spend money on this type of program, and they don't like to spend money. They don't want to give us more cars than we need. So there's always going to be some push there. And so one of the key selling points that allowed me to move forward in this program is EVs, and the thought of potentially bringing EVs on in patrol in the future. Because one of the biggest hangups for EVs is charging time. If you hot seat your cars and your cars run 2 out of 3 shifts every day, how do you charge them? When do they get the break to charge? How do you keep them in the field? How do you keep them running? And so one of the key sales points for me for this program was that, when EVs came on and when there were EVs capable of doing what we needed them to do in patrol, we wouldn't be able to make that jump because our current fleet program and our current vehicle processes wouldn't allow us to have the charge time for these EVs. So with that sales pitch, it was approved and we started the process and we began ordering new cars and expanding our fleet. That gave me an extra 20 some black and whites to deal with for our patrol program to allow me to push out that program. But then we were also in the world of COVID when that got approved. And as I tried to buy those cars and as I tried to bring them on the line, we realized we were having production delays in the post-COVID era. And I actually reached a point that it was taking 2 years between me ordering a Ford black and white and between me having that vehicle back in the field ready for use. And during those delays, we're losing cars. Cars are getting wrecked. Cars are, exceeding 100,000 miles and then some. They're going out of service for mechanical issues. And we can't there's no way for us to keep up with that level of delay. And we're facing the possibility of, struggling to field everybody in patrol because we're running out of cars. And I needed to find a way to keep cars in service. And while I'm looking at those production delays, the Chevy released the Blazer EV. And in my conversations with Chevy and my timelines for production, I learned that I could get them in a timely fashion that would allow us to get them in the field. And with that pivot, I was able to then sell to my command, who was opposed, generally speaking, to EVs and the idea of EVs being able to handle the rigors of patrol, that we needed to move to the EVs to allow us to move forward and keep fielding cars on a daily basis. And the method that I used was I told them we would assign the Blazers to our SRO division, who didn't need the same mileage requirements that a patrol officer needed. They're used one use per day, and I would move the existing SRO vehicles to patrol. I also assigned one of the cars to traffic, which is my team, to allow us to test and evaluate it. But that was the sales pitch that I was able to do to get us to buy up on the EVs, the Blazer EVs. And we bought those cars truly. I'd seen them at production shows, but I'd never had an opportunity to drive one until we'd already made the purchase. It was, to some extent, a leap of faith. But it was the only way I could make it happen. And it was the way we were able to make that jump and keep our fleet continuing, where we had cars coming in and we could continue to keep officers in the field. So that's kind of the opportunity and the way it came about and how I was able to sell it. But then, of course, we had officers who hadn't seen the Blazers. We didn't know what their response was going to be. We hadn't driven one. They all say what the mileage is going to be, but we didn't have that experience at that time and exactly how it was going to work. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned, we got the cars and we ordered 10 of them, which is about 10% of our black and white fleet. We got one put into service relatively quickly, but we were missing a couple parts. At the time, we couldn't get the right MDC mount. They didn't have door panels for the back seats available, and they didn't have the window bars available. So we assigned that one to traffic, and we just avoided putting prisoners in the back seat, and we used it for a little bit. And to our surprise, the mileage has not been an issue at all. It's actually used as a traffic car during the day and a DUI car at nights on the weekends. Traffic guys in my department work a ton of overtime, so there are a lot of double shifts being run by that car. And we charge it to 80% on the regular, which is what the battery recommends. And they have yet to run it dry or to even put themselves in a position where they were stressed about mileage. So that has been a fantastic surprise and a great outcome. But on the whole, the parts availability was not what they had told us it was going to be. When we bought the cars, of course, we were told every part's ready, it's all out there. But when you're the first to buy something, when you buy the first cars and the first time they come out there, there's always delays. There's always going to be things that aren't quite right. And so you're going to have to, deal with that, those delays and that possible, things not being perfect the first time, and having to make some changes and some adjustments as you go forward. Likewise with the parts availability, our outfitter had never seen one of these. They'd never built one. So, what the time it took for them to do a Ford and build us a Ford patrol car, the first Blazer, it definitely took them a significant amount of time longer. And they basically mapped out the car, mapped out the wiring diagrams, and had to create their own wiring harnesses and a lot of the things that they do. So that first one definitely took some time, but once the first one is done, they're now building about a car. They can now put them together in about a week and a half at the most. And that's one guy building the car. So that's a good upgrade, but it took some time the first go around. And there are some compromises with these cars. One of them is they don't come with a passenger side spotlight. And in the past, you used to drill the spotlights in, you used to add your own. Nobody wants to cut into an A-pillar on a car anymore. So you'd have to move to an electronic one to have it mounted somewhere. But for our purposes, we found the way we're deploying the cars, nobody is missing the passenger spotlight. It hasn't been an issue so far. When we move that out to patrol, we might have to look into getting the electronic spotlights, but they are available. They are out there. So you just have to kind of consider some of these things as you're moving forward. We'd like to add some quick chargers to allow us to have a little bit more ability to charge cars faster when we need them. And be ready if we need to do something where there's, a major issue where we have to get the cars in and out of the field in a faster manner. The response has been fantastic. Luckily for me, I got to drive one of these cars at Brad's event before we bought them or before we had them outfitted. So at that point, we purchased them, but we didn't have them and we hadn't driven them yet. And I found the vehicle to be fantastic. I was really, really excited about buying it after we got them or after I'd driven it. So much so that I went out and bought one for myself, the civilian model. So that's how much I like the car, and I'd never owned an EV before that. The officers who've gotten them so far all love the cars. They have some concerns about me sending them to patrol with younger officers, that they're going to get wrecked because they're so fast. But other than that, they all absolutely love the cars that are driving. And we've had no mileage issues at all with the SROs, even when they've worked overtimes and other issues. So we think it will work fine in patrol with the mileage that's there, as long as we're using our shared vehicle program that we've talked about earlier. The other things we've learned with the cars that we've gone is there are actually some safety advantage to these cars that I hadn't even thought of before I got the chance to drive them and experience them. One of them particularly is what they call one-pedal driving. There's some training issues that go on with that. That's a little bit of a learning curve to get used to. It's optional. You can turn it on or off in the vehicle. But if you don't know what it is, it allows you to drive the vehicle with just the gas pedal, and you're using just the gas pedal to modulate both acceleration and braking. And while that may sound weird and it may sound like it's not as good or not less, I don't know. It's not what people are used to. But what we found in actual use is in a panic stop, when you use the one pedal braking, when you remove your foot from the gas pedal, before you even begin to press the brake pedal, the vehicle is already braking for you, because it's part of the one pedal driving experience. And so you're actually getting on the brake faster than you would in a normal car or without using the one pedal braking. The other side of it is, I don't know if it's ever happened to anybody else here, but I can think of several occasions where officers have jumped out of a vehicle in a hurry and thought they had thrown it in park, but in fact hit reverse or neutral, only to experience the vehicle, driving into a fence or into a house or into another car or over the arrestee that they were detaining. But with the one pedal driving, when you take your foot off the gas, even if the vehicle is left in drive, it will stop itself and it will hold the vehicle stopped, and you won't have to worry about it rolling over anybody or rolling away from where you left it. So there's a lot of great things to consider about these cars and a lot of opportunities out there with them. And that's all I have, Rachel.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Rusty. And last but not least, we are going to hear from Neil, and he's going to share with us some information about the actual process behind the implementation of these vehicles and his experience doing so. So Neil, I'm going to pass this over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And Rusty, I was one of those cops guilty of letting my car roll away on a high-risk stop because I didn't put it in park. So, slide, please. I'm Neil Cervenka. I'm a retired chief of police from the rural North Coast. It's Fort Bragg, California. If you've ever heard of Glass Beach in California, that's us. It was a trash dump for 100 years, and then they stopped dumping trash, and the sea put a whole bunch of sea glass back up. So it's a beautiful area. We have about 7,000 population, and we're the only incorporated city for 70 miles of coastline. So we become a hub. Our service population is 20,000-ish, 20 to 25,000. We're about 3 square miles for the city proper. Tourism is our number one economic driver. Then logging and fishing. Logging used to be huge here. We used to have big mills, and they're all gone because of regulation. We have about 18 sworn police officers, which about 70% of the police departments in the United States have fewer than 25 sworn. So that puts us in the majority of police department sizes. And we have 8 marked patrol vehicles total. So quite a bit different than Chula Vista, which is a very large agency, especially when you compare it to the rest of the country. And their test group of vehicles was our entire fleet. So that's where our experiences are a little bit different. Slide. So when the California governor put out a mandate that there would be no more gas vehicles sold in California after 2035, I was at my previous agency. I was a lieutenant, and I began researching EVs when that mandate came out. I wanted to get ahead of the rush. Is typical with government is when the mandate comes out, everyone waits until 2 years or a year before it takes effect, and then everyone tries to rush to get it done. So I wanted to beat that rush. I worked up a program at my last agency where I was a lieutenant, acting captain, and the chief was not interested in it. But when I became chief of Fort Bragg, I got to do what I wanted because I was the chief, and it made things a lot easier. The fleet they were driving when I got there, there was 2 10-year-old Crown Victorias still in service that were constantly breaking down and it costing a fortune in maintenance to maintain. There was already a council goal to electrify the city's fleet, and that had been before I got there. So when I introduced the idea of going electric, it was very well received. The infrastructure was going to be somewhat of an issue. We have a Tesla supercharging station in our small town because it is a tourist destination, and we have another off-brand level 3 charger. But we were going to need to do some infrastructure changes at the police department to get some chargers in there. The selection of the EV platform came down to good timing. So it was before the Blazer was out, just before anything else came out. Mach-E was kind of being used a little bit. I got in touch with Ford Corporate and was talking to him about the Mach-E, and he let me know that Ford was going to be releasing the F-150 Lightning Pro SSV in 2023, and that was more of a purpose-built vehicle for law enforcement. The other advantage for us is the F-150 internal combustion is already a police vehicle. There's already aftermarket parts for it. There's already wiring harnesses. There's already prisoner transport cages. There's already seats. There's already lights. There's everything for the F-150, and the sizes are the same between electric and ICE. So by going with the F-150, we could get all those parts and we weren't going to be delayed. And then another point of going with the F-150 is Pacific Gas and Electric, who is our electric company, offered a EV fleet grant that for medium and heavy duty vehicles, they would pay for all of the infrastructure of bringing the DC lines, the high voltage lines, to your site and a transformer. You had to pay for the chargers, the level 3 chargers, but by going with a pickup truck, that put us into this grant category. So we were able to put in 2 level 3 chargers and 4 level 2 chargers at the police department for about 10% of the total project cost, which for government and tax dollars, that's really good. The outfitting, our outfitter had never done a electric vehicle before. So they had the first one for about a month until they figured it out. And much like Rusty's experience, now they can put out a truck in about 4 days because they've got everything mapped out. They've figured it out. We had to do an extra battery because the 12-volt battery that comes with the Ford is like a motorcycle battery, and it wasn't going to be enough to keep everything charged. And so they installed a second marine grade deep cycle big 12-volt battery in there that's daisy chained together, and everything charges off the main big battery. And that has shown that we have never, we leave our trucks with the lights on at crash scenes for hours, and we've never had a problem with charging. A colleague who also implemented F-150 after us, their outfitter convinced them they didn't need the extra battery, and they've had their vehicle die multiple times on crash sites, the 12-volt battery. So the big battery is good, but the 12-volt battery dies. Slide. So there were some early failures, and there were failures on my part as the chief of implementing this program. So we didn't have any structured training for officers. When I became a cop last century, you got handed something and told to go figure it out, and that's kind of what I did with this one. And it was a big mistake that I'll explain later. We got no buy-in from the unofficial leaders. I had unrealistic expectations of how it was going to be viewed. The timelines, the charging project and the remodel project at the police department was supposed to be done in 6 months. It wound up taking 18 months because the transformer that we needed was only built in China, and there were supply chain issues. And when they told us originally 3 months, that got extended to 15 months for delivery for that transformer. So there are those problems and those issues that come in, but we couldn't move forward with the rest of the project until we had the transformer. So everything got delayed. And then finally, I had an overestimation of the officers' willingness to learn on their own, like I did. I like the tech, and I dove deep into EV and figured it out. And I kind of thought they would too, because we were getting them, but they didn't. So it's very important to understand that you're going to have to do some training. But the thing is, we were first, as far as Ford corporate knows, we were the first in the nation to outfit an F-150 for general patrol. So when you're going first, there's problems with that, and that's why we do webinars like this, so other people can learn from our mistakes. Slide, please. Our lessons learned early on. We were sending 2 sergeants to a recruitment fair in Sacramento, which is about 3 hours away, 3.5 hours away from where we are. I assumed, because they were both tech guys, both drone people, they had computers and gadgets and everything. I incorrectly assumed that they would know the difference between a level 1 and a level 3 charger, and they did not. So when they got to their first charging stop that they had programmed into the computer, it was a level 1. And they panicked, and they waited about an hour before calling and saying it's going to take 6 hours to charge. And I found out they were at a level 1. They got to a level 3, charged up. It was too late. They had to come back home. There was a bunch of grumblings that it was going to be a failure, and EVs weren't good for patrol because, if it were a gas car, they could have just filled up with gas and kept going. And, you don't have to search for gas stations like you do chargers. So there was a lot of trepidation in the department at that point. Thankfully, that next week, Ford corporate called and asked if Fort Bragg PD would bring a truck down to the California Peace Officers Association Cops West Fleet Expo event in Ontario, California, which is about 650 miles from Fort Bragg. And I agreed to that. And I said that I would drive it myself because I had confidence in the platform. One of the sergeants that had gone on the recruitment trip wanted to go as well. And he wanted to ride with me. I offered for him to fly because he was hesitant about the EVs. I think he just wanted to prove me wrong and laugh at me when we ran out of charge somewhere along I-5. But it didn't happen. So what happened was we had a completely uneventful trip. We programmed the trip into the computer using only level 3 chargers. We stopped 3 times for about 20-25 minutes. And the truck performed flawlessly all the way down to Ontario. What we found is the community relations aspect of it was incredible. There's at one point we stopped, it was somewhere along I-5 and one of our stops, and we pulled into this charging, this row of chargers. And next to us was an EV charging, and the man in the car gave us the dirtiest look when we pulled in. And we got out and we stretched, and then we plugged the truck into the charger, and this man jumped out of his car, and he was so excited. He was giving us a dirty look because he thought we were just a police car taking up an EV spot because we were police and we thought we could park wherever we wanted. He had no idea there was an electric car. We talked to him for 20 minutes. He took pictures. He told his friends. Completely changed his view. And that happened again and again and again with people coming up to us when we were charging, just fascinated that a police car was EV and especially a truck. And then finally, the officer comfort issue. When you're using especially the F-150, they recommend you use the heated seat instead of the cabin air because it's much more efficient. And we had one officer who was constantly cold all the time, and she kept her seat heater on high, cabin heater on high, steering wheel heater, and then had multiple electronic devices plugged in, and she couldn't figure out why she was using more charge than her colleagues. And officer comfort will impact the charge. As long as you know that going into it, you can plan for it just like anything else. Slide, please. So when you're framing EVs for your audience, if you're going to be implementing or broaching the idea of transitioning EV for patrol, there's if you can put it in a different way. So environmental benefits is an obvious one, and on the very liberal north coast of California, as far as the community goes, most of the people, that's what they wanted to hear. Our local grassroots institute, who does a lot of environmental work, we're thrilled that we're going to EVs because of the environmental benefits. Now, the economic benefits are for the taxpayer. So after about 6 months, when we were running 5 of our 8 marked units as EVs, we were able to extrapolate some data and determined we were going to be saving about $40,000 a year in fuel cost. That's after the increase in electricity was taken into account, and about $20,000 a year in maintenance costs because there is nothing to maintain on them. Our fleet mechanic takes about 20 minutes to do the 6 months check on them. It's just tire rotation and windshield washer fluid, and that's about it. So while 60,000 doesn't sound like a lot to these, like Chula Vista, I mean, 60,000 is probably an accounting error on one budget line. But for a small department, $60,000 is a lot. $60,000 is 2 part-time employees. $60,000 is a whole nother police vehicle. $60,000 is 1.5 times the entire training budget for the department. So having that savings was tremendous. And if you extrapolate it out for a larger EV fleet, you would probably see those scalable savings. You can also frame it with the advanced technology, especially with the younger generation coming in. There's a lot of tech in this that they can really get into. And I know with our younger officers, they really like to brag to their friends in other departments that they were driving this EV truck. And really, it was the best tool for us because there was no Blazer at the time, and unfortunately, the F-150 Lightning was discontinued this year. But they're going to bring out another electric truck next year. It really worked out very well for us. It was the best tool. Our officers got in several pursuits with them, and they loved them. They felt very safe. They were never out of control. They handled exceptionally. They braked exceptionally. And they were very comfortable in them, less back injuries, all sorts of stuff. Slide, please. So 2 years into the program, I sent out a survey to all the officers, and I got about 100% response, which is pretty impressive for a survey to cops. One question was, what was the most difficult part of the EV transition? By far, number one was range anxiety, because nobody understood EVs, nobody understood how the range worked, nobody understood regenerative braking. And for us, I mean, it's 3 square miles, so they hardly use any charge during the day because it's all stop signs and red lights, and so they're constantly charging. Unfortunately, our jail is an hour and a half away across 2 mountain ranges and it takes it's about 70 miles to get there through twisty, turny mountain road. So for the most part, you're getting some regenerative braking on the way back, because on the way back, you're going downhill to the coast. On the way there, you're going uphill. We're going from zero, we're going about sea level to 2,000 feet of elevation. So you're going up the whole way and you're losing a lot of energy that way. So really learning what charge you had to be at to get to the jail and back was very important. 2 and 3 were tied on that question, where it was a completely new platform and knowing where to charge, because everyone understands gas stations, but nobody really understands chargers. Another question that we asked was, what would have helped during the initial deployment? Number 1 was easy access instructional videos. It'd be great to have OEM produced videos of these police platforms that went through everything, understanding chargers, understanding tire wear, understanding acceleration, understanding the level 1, 2, and 3 charging, and how everything works. We do that with many of the other things we do, firearms and that type of equipment. You learn everything about it, and then you learn how to use it. We should have done that with this as well. And that was one of my failures. And then the in-person training, when we finally got them there should have been more training on all the different features and functions instead of just how to drive the EV. Slide, please. Also, with that survey, we did a satisfaction with patrol EVs. So 80% of the officers were happy or very happy with the EV platform and using EV for patrol. More importantly, 0% were completely dissatisfied or refused to use it. So anything, especially in law enforcement, anything that you can make 80% of the people happy and 0% of the people completely unhappy is a win. I mean, and it's kind of a unicorn that you can do that. Especially the image you see on the screen, you see our level 3 chargers off to the left there. Especially when we got those installed, it was a complete game changer, because now we were just using level 2 chargers and extension cords from 220 volt outlets for a year and 8 months until the chargers came online. So when they went from having to charge overnight to being able to charge in 20 minutes, they were thrilled, because when they come back from the jail, it's a 3-hour round trip, 3.5 with booking a prisoner into jail. They come back, they pull into the level 3, and they get out and do their paperwork, use the restroom, get a snack, whatever. By the time they come back out to their truck to finish their shift, they're back at 80% already. So now that whole range anxiety is completely eliminated with our in-house DC chargers, which is very important. Slide, please. So in conclusion, expect failure and resistance. Plan for your in-depth training, either video or in person. Both would be preferable. The video ones, if you can have a library on the car computer or whatever, that they could search those videos out and use them when they needed them. Get your unofficial leaders on board immediately. And those unofficial leaders, what they are, they're the people without rank, but everybody listens to them. So the senior patrol or just somebody that's well-liked in the department that other people will follow their lead. If you can get them on board immediately and start having them sing the praises of the platform and learning how to use it, it'll go much easier with the rest of the department. And then continually solicit feedback, both from internal and external in the community. We're using these for all the community events. National Night Out, we put a DJ in the back of one of the trucks, and he ran all of his professional equipment plugged into the truck for 4 hours, and it used 6% of the battery. So that, and then we also ran a popcorn machine and a snow cone machine off the truck. They were just plugged into the truck, and the public loved it. They thought that was the coolest thing in the world that we were running everything off this truck. So I really encourage you to get that feedback from the public and internal. And then last slide. There's my information. If you're trying to push it through to your organization, I'm happy to talk to you at any time. I've gone through the pain, both as a lieutenant and as a chief, trying to get it implemented and then implementing it and then dealing with all the officer turmoil and the problems. So I'm happy to show that knowledge. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you so much to our other panelists. If you guys could come back on camera, we'll have a Q&A now. And folks in the audience, again, feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat. I've got it up here. Happy to ask. But I have a couple of questions myself, and I want to start with just kind of talking about the technology. Brad, I want to go back to you, and I'm generally gonna, ask a question of one of you guys, but feel free to, jump in if you have something to add. But Brad, is your agency, is this agency the only agency that tests vehicles for all of the manufacturers of the pursuit vehicles, or do you test any non-pursuit vehicles?
No, we are not the only one that will test all of them. So Michigan State Police, they also will test all of the manufacturers' pursuit rated vehicles. So they just run their tests a little different than we do. But we work together and we share our data, and but they'll test all of them as well for all 4 of those manufacturers. And we're only test pursuit rated vehicles. So we're not testing any civilian type models or special services vehicles. The whole purpose of the test is to test the abilities of its being pursued, in a pursuit or being driven to its limits. So yeah, it's all pursuit rated vehicles.
Gotcha. We've got a question here. So how are the EV equipment upfit capability evaluated? How is that evaluated, both in the vehicle equipment and onboard equipment power, KW and KWH demand? How is that equipment evaluated?
I can answer that. Luckily, our upfitter had an electrical engineer on staff, and they did all of the power draw evaluation for all of the equipment, which is why he knew that we needed a second 12-volt battery to ensure that if you left it running on a collision or traffic safety point or whatever, that it wouldn't kill that little motorcycle battery and prevent you from getting back into the truck.
Got it. Okay. Let's see, my next question here. One of our audience members is asking, are there police applications that EV PPVs are not a realistic fit for? And I guess that can go to anybody.
I'll chime in a little to say that I think it just depends on the agency and what their use would be and their charging capabilities. It'd be hard to say that, if you had an agency that didn't have the fast chargers and had a very large area that they would cover, there may be that scenario where it wouldn't be applicable. But I guess it's just kind of a broad question. It'd be hard to say what it couldn't do.
Yeah, I would. Go ahead, Rusty.
Go ahead.
I would say that, our city is 3 square miles, which for many metropolitan areas, bigger cities, LA, that type, their beat areas are about 3 square miles. So if I know Elk Grove PD up by Sacramento is also testing some EVs, and they're dealing with the infrastructure first, but he's looking at putting high-speed chargers in each beat so the officers can stay on their beat. And you just have to do some planning, but I've said from the beginning, it's probably not a good platform for CHP right now because they do hundreds of miles and long pursuits, where metropolitan agencies, our pursuits on average are probably less than 5 minutes and probably less than 3 miles. So, CHP has a country-sized state that they have to maintain. So it might be a little more difficult for them.
Rusty, did you have anything to add?
No, just to add on to what they had to say. It's really just about the size and how many miles you're putting on the car a day. If you're putting on so many miles a day that you can't meet the charging demands, or you don't have that charging infrastructure, then you have to start with that infrastructure. But if you have the infrastructure or you're not putting that many miles on, then there's really no limit.
Mhm. So we actually got a question here about the infrastructure. If Neil and Rusty, I think this is for you guys. How did you go about selecting the EV chargers? What was the process to get the EV network providers to participate?
We were already using ChargePoint in the city, so the city had a contract with them, and our public works department thought it would be easier just to stick with that contract and go with ChargePoint than look at any of the other chargers. I would not recommend using that method. I would recommend trying out some other. There's if you like Electrify America, if you're whatever platform you're going with, if you find the chargers that are already in their network for Chevy or Ford or Lucid or whatever, it'd be much easier to use a charger from that manufacturer because then it's all just plug and charge. You don't have to do anything else.
For us, it was we also have ChargePoint. It was decided before I had really a hand in the project. We had them long before we had the cars. But we are actually, that deal is about to expire next year, and our city right now is doing a whole reevaluation of our entire city's electrification. So we expect to have something new coming online in the next year or two.
Got it. Great. So I want to go back to the testing conversation. Brad, we talked a little bit about the testing process for ICE vehicles versus with the EVs. One of our audience members had asked if there were any comparison tests on tire and brake wear with the ICE vehicles compared to EVs.
So we don't do that as part of our testing.
Okay.
The manufacturers decide which of their pursuit rated type tires they were going to run on their vehicles. And that's how they design their platforms around them and what works best for them. For us as an agency, though, we will, separate from this test, we test alternate tires for our vehicles because in some areas, it may, being statewide, some tires are harder to get in certain areas or different tire contracts. So we will test alternate pursuit tires to see if the vehicle itself performs worse or not, or we have certain parameters that'll follow. And so that's what we do for our own purposes of running different tires, but not for part of this vehicle test that we do. It's
Got
just
it.
for the performance of the vehicle itself.
Okay. I have one more tech related question, and then I've got one in the chat here that I want to ask. But with the pace at which EV technology is progressing, I'm interested to see, what issues have you seen with EV pursuit vehicles right now? With the rate that the technology is progressing, what do you expect to see in the future? How do you see those issues being addressed, and how do you see potential benefits? Are there any other potential benefits that you expect to see?
From the testing side of it, like I kind of mentioned before, is I see the issues of being driven in a pursuit type environment or high speeds. You go through a lot more of your battery a lot faster, right? You lose a lot more range than in comparison when you're running your internal combustion vehicles. One thing we have seen though is each year the manufacturers continue to perfect these vehicles. They're performing better each time that they come out, where sometimes as they've lost a little bit of performance as the battery goes down, they've improved that. I think as we see the range and the efficiencies of these batteries with technology, if they get more range out of these vehicles, they'll be a little more competitive with that range and time compared to internal combustion vehicles. And like we talked about is, you run low on fuel, it's quick to go anywhere and fill up. You're a little more limited on the EVs. So if they already by design have a lot more range, you have less concern about having to stop for charging and fast charging, wherever that may be. So I definitely think that technology is advancing. Hard to say at what point it'll reach that break even where I think people have less of that range anxiety that happens, right? And we would use so much more. Again, when you're driving at high speeds, you go through so much more of that range where it no longer is a 300-mile vehicle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that makes sense. Here's another question here, which we talked a little bit about earlier this week when we met. Can we talk a little bit about the ballistic protection around battery packs and what the protection for the officers looks like in the upfit of these vehicles? And I can
Yeah,
whoever.
so
Yeah.
for us, we don't have specific ballistic protection around the battery packs beyond what the manufacturer has in place. But we do use a company called Angel Armor puts out door armor. And that was in our Forge before, and we're installing that in the Chevys as well in our EVs. So we have those Angel Armor door panels in all our cars, which will extend, down below where we're talking about for the battery packs.
And for us, as far as the armor around the battery, we didn't armor the gas tanks in our gas cars. So as far as there's already some protection on for the F-150s, there's some protection because it's down low and there's skid plates on it. But it wasn't considered.
Do you mind, Rachel? I do want to jump back a little bit on the tire and brake wear. For those who aren't experienced with an EV, one of the things the EVs have is regenerative braking. So while you might experience heavier tire wear based on the weight of the vehicles, you actually are going to see a decrease in brake wear because a lot of the braking is accomplished by the regeneration and doesn't actually use the pads and the rotors unless you're exceeding what the vehicle can do with regeneration. My sergeant has a Tesla. I think he's got over 100,000 miles on it. He's never had to change the brakes. So that's a common experience with EVs.
And to add on to that, the tire wear is more. We noticed that, and our fleet noticed that. It's about 2 to 1 from regular cars. It could be from the weight, or it could be from young officers that really like that launch capability of the EV, because the back tires are wearing faster, and the torque on EVs is just so much more dramatic than combustion engines.
Excellent. So we're getting some questions about infrastructure, which I am very excited about. One of the questions here was, has a microgrid infrastructure been considered to transition the police department to become a resilience hub? I actually just did a whole educational series here in Ohio. And John, I know that we've had some conversations about infrastructure, but I would love to hear from you and then turn it over to the guys here too, if you guys had any experience with this as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel. I have put some thought into this question, and I hadn't prepared in my bullets for this, but let me touch this. Let's see. Are y'all able to see the slide thinking about charging?
Yes.
So yeah, I just kind of wanted to wrap up, and we've touched on it several times, and I don't think we've really given it sufficient emphasis that when you think about implementing electric vehicles, you really must start your thinking with the duty cycle of the vehicles that you're thinking of replacing. In some cases, a level 1 will suffice if it's not a heavy duty, heavy mile, long range vehicle, and especially if it's housed overnight at a depot or if it's a take-home vehicle. Level 1 charging could work just fine. Level 2 is the fleet workhorse. That's what fleets are typically using for depot charging or during breaks. But as our speakers have mentioned, hot seat operation of vehicles, you're going to have to use DC fast charging. DC fast charging is much more capital intensive, much more expensive, and harder to site, and sometimes harder to permit. So you might consider planning around publicly developed DC fast stations. Are there DC fast stations in your community already? If not, perhaps there could be public-private collaboration to create those so the cost is spread across multiple use communities, the community using it as well as public vehicles. Portable chargers are going to play an important role also. Imagine a vehicle where the operator mistakenly runs the battery down. If you have in-house fleet maintenance, they may want to have a charger there in the service bay. These portable chargers can also be used for special events. It's something to consider. Take-home vehicle charging is an area that has recently been explored, I say recent years. And the leaders in that area that, to my knowledge, are the state of Colorado and the city of Durham, North Carolina. I am not aware of any municipality that has as much experience as the city of Durham, North Carolina, where for more than a year now, they've had a municipal-wide policy for take-home EVs, and all of the policies and procedures and financial and insurance, et cetera. They've run the traps, they've figured it out, and they're working it there in Durham. The state of Colorado also has a statewide policy for EV charging, take-home charging. It's very similar to public employees being assigned a take-home cell phone. So don't try and explore this independently, build off of the success of others, and look to the state of Colorado and the city of Durham for guidance there. And finally, just make it standard operating procedure. I think that's enough said on that point. To the point of microgrid infrastructure, this is obviously there's the resilience benefits of having your own charging infrastructure that's running off of batteries, perhaps, and renewable energy, rooftop solar, for example. These are much more capital intensive and really can't stand on a conventional economic analysis. You have to think about what you're buying there is the service and assurance of resilience. No matter what happens to the broader electric grid, you'll still be in operation. That resilience hub can provide services to the community as well. Perhaps it's at your local disaster shelter, that kind of thing. I think I don't want to go too much deeper into it than that, but folks are welcome. I welcome folks to contact the Clean Tech Center for more information about that. We're in communication with a number of fleets that have established charging hubs that are powered by renewable energy and have battery backups. So thank you for letting me share that. And I have a similar set of thoughts that I can share about upfitting if we have time, but let's keep going with the questions. I think these prepared questions and the ones coming in from the audience are really valuable. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you so much, Sean. One of the things that I'd like to put into the chat as well here, since we were just talking about microgrids, there was as I mentioned, we just wrapped up a whole educational series up here in Ohio about microgrids for municipalities. It's just something of interest is for Ohio specifically, but in case anybody's interested in learning. Rusty and Neil, and Brad as well, do you guys have any experience with exploring microgrids for charging at all?
For us, it would have been great, but because of what PG&E was offering with their fleet program, that's not on microgrid. It has to come from their main hub. So it was, it would have turned about a $50,000, what our expense of running all those chargers, DC chargers and everything, cost us about $50,000, which is really low. And if we went with a microgrid, it would have been probably $1 million out here.
Right.
So, I mean, smaller agencies. However, microgrid is, if you don't have that grant and you can plan for it, I'm a firm believer in the microgrid technology because it will make you resilient. It, with power outages and everything else affecting the world, it'll keep your fleet going. And it will put public safety first.
We have looked into it as well. For us, just the size of our operation, trying to do something like that, we've just evaluated. I mean, the generator we have to run our building if there's a power outage is so labor intensive. I mean, it's a full-time job basically for someone to go get the gas truck, come back, fill up the generator, go get gas, come back, fill up the generator. Just to cover our building operations would require a significant battery outlay that we don't have the money for nor the space. And that we'd have to accomplish that before we could really extend it into powering EVs as well.
That makes sense. So we had talked about the technology a little bit. We've talked a little bit about infrastructure. I want to talk about the decision-making process, both the experiences with the decision-making process, future decision-making. Um, Rusty, so we had talked about kind of like this phased approach where we still have some ICE vehicles and we have EVs as well, and we've got hybrids. What would your arguments be for or against a fully electric fleet for law enforcement? And Brad and Neil, feel free to hop in as well.
Well, I think we've talked about a couple times about, public safety and being able to field the fleet. We've got to be able to respond to calls. We've got to have cars available. They've got to work. And so, if absent the microgrid that we talked about, that would be fantastic. That's pie in the sky, but it's not, we're not there yet. Absent that, I would argue against a fleet that's fully ICE or EV, because you want to be able to handle the emergency, whatever it is. We've had instances in our city where there have been fuel shortages and there's been alerts where we might not be able to fuel our vehicles or we might not be able to get gasoline. And so that's a great argument for increasing what we have as far as EVs and expanding the EVs in our fleet. But the opposite is also true. The emergency could be we no longer have power. We no longer have a grid. And we've had power outages that have gone for multiple days, and now we don't have a way to charge those vehicles. And so for that reason, in the current climate, I would endorse, diversifying your fleet so that you have the ability to, if we have both, then we can always get cars in the field. We can always get officers to where they need to be. But if we're entirely one way or the other, then you're going to, run the risk of not being able to get there.
And I have a slightly different viewpoint because we're a smaller area, smaller agency, much less crime. And our vehicles will go 2.5 12-hour shifts without charging. So because it is such a small area, unless we have to get to the jail. So for us, when the power goes out on the coast, there's one gas station that has a generator, and that's it. So as soon as that gas station runs out of generator or runs out of fuel, there's no more gas in town. Where our generator at the police department was run on propane, and we can switch from the high speed to the level 2 and the 220 volt outlet. And last time we had a power outage, we determined we could keep our fleet charged and the building running for 7 days on what we have in our propane storage. So it made more sense, but we're very rugged up here, and we have landslides and earthquakes and tsunamis and stuff. So that kind of stuff would, all electric actually does better than the ICE vehicles for us.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this kind of speaks to a through line that we're seeing in this discussion, which is why I'm glad that we have a kind of a variety of perspectives here, is that, there is no one size fits all. It is a understanding your operations, is understanding your fleet, is understanding the population that you serve. We had talked about earlier this week, that cold weather operations are not something that you guys, need to worry about. And I had 3 feet of ice on my front porch, just a couple weeks ago. So I think that this kind of underscores the importance of participating in these webinars, gathering information from speakers like this who can share their experiences, which might not mirror your operations, but is at least valuable information. And John, I saw that you came on camera here. Did you want to add something?
Thank you, Ray. No, I just really
Okay.
nod my head vigorously about one size fits all. There is no one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be great. It would be easy if it was, and the person who had that answer would be, a billionaire. But here we are. It's different. So, no, this is great. We've got a little bit more time. I've got quite a few questions that I still want to ask you guys. But Brad, so we had talked about the testing that your agency does. Does your agency run any EVs or hybrids right now?
So we don't have any pursuit rated vehicles that are EVs that we're using currently.
Okay.
In our fleet as a whole, we do have some hybrids and EVs that are used for certain specialty type details as well as pool cars, but not as our actual enforcement fleet. And part of that is, being the fact that we are statewide. We have 102 area offices. We have 8 field divisions plus all these other miscellaneous facilities that we have, to where getting the infrastructure to do it for an enforcement fleet, it's difficult, and not saying it's not something that won't happen in time. It's just we're not at that point right now that we can pull that off, to where same concept of running vehicles over and over. If someone comes in from the morning shift, they go fuel up their car and then hand it off to the next person to take it out, right? So it's a quick fuel up and go. We'd have to have that infrastructure where they can pull it into a charger and get enough charge that the next person can just jump in and take off in it. And again, back to the one size fits all thing, an area out in the desert where they travel hundreds of miles a day out in that heat and, away from the area office far, it would show some challenges, and like we talked about, the technology advancing, who knows what the future holds, but that's the challenges we face right now.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in this kind of discussion about decision making, Neil, during your presentation, you had mentioned that the grant that you guys were working on had kind of required the pickup platform, and that you generally had great experience with it. Both the public and the officers had great experience. Would you have selected another platform, if you didn't have to use the pickup?
No, because when we did it, there were no other platforms. The only
Okay.
other thing being used was Tesla, and I wasn't a fan of using Tesla for law enforcement because everything is custom, and we're so remote. I know it's shocking, but sometimes police officers get in collisions and cause damage to their vehicles. Getting an F-150 fixed on the rural north coast of California is much easier than getting a Tesla fixed. Teslas would be down for months, and when you only have a fleet of 8, having one vehicle down is a big burden on the entire fleet. So a couple of weeks after we got 5 of the Lightnings in all at the same time. One of them got rear-ended, and it was only in the shop for 4 days, and they because it's all F-150 parts, so it's just easy to replace. So that was a lot of my thought process in going in with the platform that we used.
So if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? And Rusty, you're still in a position to do things differently as well. As you've gone through the initial adoption phase, and as you're kind of continuing down this path, what have you learned? What will you do differently? So I'll kind of, Neil, if you want to go first, and then we'll turn over to Rusty.
Yeah, really doing robust learning sessions with all the staff and patrol, and setting time aside to do that. Wrapping your head around EV takes a little bit of time. When you go from gas, when you've been driving gas for 20 years, and then you get an EV. After this project, I wound up buying myself a Mach-E. So even though I'd done all this research, when I got an EV, that first 6 months was a learning curve. So really focusing on that learning curve, and getting people who have been through it before to talk to your staff would greatly improve the outcome and reduce the pain.
For me, I would say, it would have been fantastic if I had the opportunity to drive all of the vehicles and to test them all before we move forward. But that environment wasn't there. That said, now that I have had an opportunity to drive them all, I'm ecstatic with the performance of the Blazers, and the response we've had from the officers. And I don't think I would make a different choice today. That may change tomorrow. Other things come out and other things come forward. Luckily enough for me, so far all of those vehicles have been issued to a single officer, and I've done the one-on-one training with them. So we've been able to do that pretty well. And before they're opened for use for our other officers, we have our annual EVOC training coming up. So we're going to bring them out to the test course and give everybody a chance to drive them. And once they see what they can do, I think we're going to have a lot of buy-in that way. I'd love to expand the program, but we need to expand our infrastructure before I can really add more than maybe 2 more cars.
Yeah. Yep. I want to backtrack to the technology question really quick because we've got another question from the attendees here. If you guys are aware of this, have there been any battery issues, or have you experienced any battery issues with continuous DC fast charging? And then a follow-up question is, does the upfitting process cause any electronic interference?
So the DC fast charging, it's not continuous for us. For us, it's when you're going to the jail or coming back from the jail, or you were just on calls all night and you couldn't get your car to 50%. For the most part, it's all level 2 because it's better for the battery. And they plug them in when they go home at night. They plug them in when they're eating lunch, whatever. It's all that level 2 where, and they're encouraged to plug in when they're at the station into the level 2s. And we cap out at 80% charge.
For us, it's the same. We don't even have the DC fast chargers. I'd love to get them for those times when they are needed, to have a few of them around. But all of our charging so far has been the level 2s, and that's been sufficient for our needs so far.
Yeah. If I may, I'll pipe in here. I think for insights on this question of the impact of DC fast charging on battery packs, I think we need to look to the EV rideshare fleets in California. There are some companies that have accumulated more than 1 million miles on a given vehicle on the same battery. And so while we haven't studied it specifically, those are anecdotes that might be considered. I think the overarching point that I would make is that in recent years, battery technologies with their thermal management have improved so dramatically that the impacts of charging are much less than the manufacturers had even expected themselves. And so batteries, the degradation of batteries over time are much less than the manufacturers had assured. So battery health is improved and lasting much longer.
Yeah. So I know that I have more questions. I know that our audience has more questions, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time and aware of the time. We've got about 30 seconds remaining. So I just want to thank our speakers. I want to thank NAFA again, and I want to thank you, John, for putting this together and for inviting me. I think this has been a great information sharing session. And April, I know that you're going to sign us off here, so I can turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I echo all of those things. John, did you have something else you wanted to add in there?
I just wanted to push this out for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, come to Ohio.
Yes, we would love everyone to come and join us. We have some great education sessions planned, and it's a wonderful opportunity to meet your peers in the fleet industry and create that network of problem solving. Great information today. I really enjoyed hearing from everyone. If you think of a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, you can send it over to us at NAFA, and we will make sure that it gets to John and the presenters so we can get you an answer. But other than that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you so much to our presenters and NAFA and Rachel. Thank you so much.
Everybody, take care.
Bye.